Greymouth City often presented itself as a beacon of modern life, boasting tall office towers, bustling shopping districts, and sprawling parks where families strolled on weekends. Yet behind this polished image, certain corners of the city hid leftover oddities that no marketing brochure mentioned. Among them was Parksway Lake, a small, murky body of water located at the park's lesser trafficked edge. Joggers stuck to the main paths near the larger lake, rarely venturing to the secluded ponds on the outskirts, leaving Parksway Lake mostly ignored. A few battered benches and warning signs circled it, as though no official caretaker had visited in decades. Ask an older local, though, and they might share hushed warnings about the place. In the 1970s, Parksway Lake briefly hosted an alligator enclosure, part of a minor city attraction. Families would bring children to watch the scaly creatures behind a modest fence. Tour brochures bragged about the exciting reptile exhibit, but the project collapsed with little fanfare. The city claimed it was too costly, or that new regulations demanded removal. Some say a tragic accident forced a swift shutdown. The enclosure was dismantled, the alligators supposedly relocated, and the lake left to degrade. Over time, rumors grew that not all alligators had been captured, or that something more sinister than normal reptiles lay in that water. Tales emerged of midnight sightings, massive shapes gliding under the lake's surface, hisses drifting across the reeds. At first, the city dismissed these as nonsense, but sporadic incidents, unexplained drownings, vanishings, kindled a quiet fear. An older generation spoke in careful tones of ghost alligators said to roam the lake after dusk, invisible to daytime logic. Some insisted these phantoms were the restless spirits of the original creatures, or perhaps an older presence wearing a reptilian guise. Meanwhile, the city's modern developments overshadowed the legend, leaving Parksway Lake half forgotten. Yet whenever a dog disappeared near that shoreline or a rumor surfaced about a missing hiker, whispers about the ghost alligators ignited anew. Charlotte, an underappreciated local reporter, stumbled on this rumor while seeking an eye-catching piece. The concept of a haunted alligator pond sounded laughable, but the quiet alarm in older residents' eyes made her reconsider. She found partial records referencing abrupt closures in the 1970s. She discovered a caretaker's cryptic comments about something lurking after hours. Intrigued, she decided to investigate for a story. She couldn't predict that her curiosity would lead her face to face with the hush-laden water, or that the rumored ghost reptiles might be all too real, hungry for the unsuspecting and well-meaning investigators alike. Charlotte's research started with a routine trip to the municipal archives, an older building with a faint musty odor. She expected a short session, check files, confirm the old enclosure's existence, maybe find a few comedic pictures for a light-hearted article. But as she leafed through dusty city council minutes, she noticed an abrupt shift in tone around 1975. The city's reptile exhibit at Parksway Lake was initially celebrated. Then came a series of urgent memos referencing safety hazards, unaccounted species, and unexplainable accidents. One memo read, "Immediate closure recommended. Ensure the perimeter is reinforced." Public statement, shifting priorities. An official stamped it. No further data explained why it needed urgent secrecy. She dug deeper, discovering faint references to 2 drownings near the enclosure. The official cause was visitor negligence, but a side note mentioned large bite marks, though final reports omitted that detail. Why hide it? Possibly to avert panic or liability lawsuits. Another snippet, all alligators accounted for, minus 1 subadult, presumed deceased. She paused. If they never recovered that missing alligator, it might have survived or died in the pond, fueling subsequent legends. Curious, Charlotte interviewed a handful of older neighbors. 1. Ms. Lowry recalled going to see the alligators as a child. She described a chain link fence that didn't look strong enough for an adult reptile. Ms. Lowry also recalled hearing rumors of nightly growls that persisted after closure. People said the water itself grew haunted. Ms. Lowry confided. Another old resident insisted the caretaker had sounded warnings. The creature's presence had infected the pond with an older malice. That caretaker's voice was overshadowed by city hush. Charlotte's puzzle formed. Was there a hidden tragedy in which the caretaker or staff discovered something more monstrous than normal alligators, forcing them to seal the place? From an investigative standpoint, it hinted at a real cover-up. But from a mythic standpoint, the ghost alligators might represent the deceased reptiles who drowned or starved, now haunting the watery domain. She suspected there might be a quasi-demonic element, given the accounts of ephemeral reptile sightings. She pinned her next step: physically see the pond at night, gauge the vibe, perhaps snap some photos or watch for illusions. A piece of her rational side insisted it was all local superstition. Another piece twitched with intrigue and fear. When Charlotte arrived at the pond that first evening, she approached along a side path seldom used by joggers. The main park shone under lampposts, families milling around. But at the pond's edge, darkness pressed in. A battered sign declared, "Keep out, hazardous water." The fence that once confined the reptiles lay collapsed in sections. A dismal memorial to the station that once entertained families. She found it strange that no official city workers maintained the site, letting weeds and rust have their way. The water, viewed at twilight, was blacker than she expected, barely reflecting the sky's last glow. She felt the hush even then, like the air was heavier. Absent typical night insects, she filmed a short clip, describing the location, the leftover fence. She half laughed at how ordinary it looked, just a neglected pond. No red eyes glinting from the surface. Still, an intangible sense of gloom gnawed at her. Standing there alone, she sensed the water's surface was deeper than it appeared, or the ground beneath might sink to unknown depths. She stayed about an hour, pacing the perimeter. No ghost alligators lunged, no swirling illusions. She gleaned only a mild twinge of dread. As she left, though, she paused at a small footbridge crossing a drainage channel. She could have sworn she heard a faint scrape, like claws on cement, but saw nothing. The hush pressed on her ears. Shaking it off, she returned to the well-lit portion of the park, exhaling relief. Perhaps her second or third night visit might yield something more conclusive. Or maybe the rumors overstated. She told herself to remain patient. That night, she dreamed of a vast reptilian shape drifting underwater. She woke, heart pounding, though she dismissed it as an overactive imagination. The next day, local rumors soared. A dog that wandered near the pond had gone missing. The dog's owner insisted hearing a splash followed by a yelp. No sign of the dog the following morning. Charlotte realized if ghost alligators truly existed, they might have claimed an animal now. Sowing fresh fear, she decided to intensify her pursuit. Within 2 weeks, talk around the neighborhood about Parksway Lake reached a fever pitch. Some claimed they spotted swirling lights under the pond at dusk. Others swore they heard reptilian hisses from the brush. A teenage pair bragged on social media about planning a ghost gator challenge, going to the pond at midnight to record themselves. But soon after, they posted a panicked update, heard thrashing in the water. Something big. We ran. They displayed shaky phone footage, a swirl near the bank, an echoing hiss, then frantic camera movements. Critics called it staged. Locals with older knowledge recognized signs of the hush creeping in. Park officials grew alarmed at the public's revived fear. They erected extra no entry after dusk signs. urging rangers to patrol more. But the rangers, mostly understaffed, rarely approached the pond's far side at night. Meanwhile, at the city's outskirts, a second missing person report emerged, a fisherman who'd last told friends he planned to cast lines near that old alligator pond, ironically mocking the ghost stories. He never returned. Police found his gear scattered on the bank. No footprints leading away. The hush around the pond's legend thickened. Charlotte interviewed a local policeman off the record. He insisted it was a coincidence, that criminals might have abducted the man or that he simply left town. But even he looked uneasy discussing it, as though part of him believed a monstrous presence lurked below the murky water. She realized the caretaker demon, if that's what it was, might truly be active again. Possibly the wave of interest fueled it, or fresh storms had disturbed the pond's depths. She resolved to do a more formal nighttime stakeout, bringing better gear and a companion for safety. Shortly thereafter, a grim event ignited the city's attention. A park maintenance worker discovered a drowned man in the pond early one morning. News flashed of paramedics retrieving the bloated body. Onlookers glimpsed partial scarring or lacerations on the man's limbs. The coroner's preliminary statement was unusual injuries, consistent with large predatory jaws. Though no official public mention of alligators, city officials defaulted to the stance that no living alligator remained, pointing to the exhibit's closure decades ago. They muttered about possible illusions or hoaxes regarding ghost gators. But as rumors soared, many repeated the same conclusion: the caretaker presence within the pond had claimed another victim. The hush overshadowed subsequent coverage. Charlotte felt a moral impetus to warn others, but lacked complete proof beyond shaky footage. She visited the site of the drowning, noticing the fresh police tape. The hush still thick. A few curious onlookers whispered about seeing a giant shape slip below the water when the body was discovered. The hush aspect loomed in the background. None of them heard typical sounds that morning, as if even birds avoided the area. This fueled Charlotte's determination for a final, thorough investigation. She recruited Mark, an ex-colleague from her days at a small TV station, who had a sturdy camera and no fear of late-night stakeouts. Mark had once done a piece on rumored cryptids in swampy farmland. He was the best partner she could muster. Together, they planned to set up vantage points around the pond under cover of darkness, capturing any swirl or shape that indicated a supernatural predator. She knew it was risky. The caretaker or ghost reptiles might be lethal, but she felt either you expose the truth or watch more vanishings occur. On a damp, moonlit Friday, Charlotte and Mark navigated the park's deserted paths, each wearing dark clothing. The hush encroached as they approached the chain fence by the pond. Mark carried a high-lumen camera, Charlotte a secondary phone cam. The plan: remain partially hidden behind a small camouflage tarp, focusing the camera on a wide portion of the shoreline. If any illusions or ghost reptiles surfaced, they'd record. They also carried a taser baton, though uncertain if it could affect intangible gators. Around midnight, the hush thickened. Crickets fell silent. The water lay black, surface unbroken. They exchanged uneasy glances, whispering updates. Every slight ripple drew their attention. Then, around 12:25 a.m., the hush rose like a wave, pressing on their eardrums. Mark hissed, "Something's moving." Indeed, an area near the center parted with subtle ripples, a faint silhouette cresting. The camera zoomed in. A large shape glided in a slow arc. For a moment, they glimpsed a ridged tail, faintly luminous. Then it sank. Charlotte's heart hammered. They were seeing a ghost gator in real time. Mark clutched the camera, mouth dry. Moments later, a series of swirling currents approached the southern bank. Their vantage captured two more ephemeral shapes, the caretaker's brood, just subsurface. Half translucent. Mark's lens stuttered. The hush-warping audio. Then a single ghost reptile emerged. Jaws parted in a silent hiss. Charlotte trembled, capturing it in partial clarity, a reptilian muzzle flickering with a dull glow. Eyes milky white. The hush soared. She realized if that fence gave way, or if illusions overcame them, they might be dragged in. But the fence still stood. The ghost reptile retreated, submerging again. The hush lingered. They had enough footage to confirm the phenomenon. Charlotte signaled for them to quietly retreat. But as they stood, the caretaker apparently noticed. The hush flared. Splashes erupted near the shore, as if multiple ghost reptiles rushed the bank, snapping jaws that might pass intangible but still cause lethal effects. The fence rattled under a ghostly impact. Mark and Charlotte froze in horror. Just as they debated flight, a powerful lunge slammed the fence near them, half rippling the chain links. The hush roared. Charlotte let out a short scream. The fence, battered with intangible force, bent outward. Mark's flashlight flickered across the monstrous shape, a ghostly reptile pushing its massive snout through the worn chain. They realized, intangible or not, it could interact physically enough to tear the barrier. Another swirl from the water indicated more shapes rising. The hush overshadowed normal reality, as though the caretaker demanded fresh victims. Charlotte and Mark scrambled, cameras in hand, sprinting away from the immediate perimeter. They heard wet hissing behind them. The hush hammered their senses, no typical night sounds, just the caretaker's domain. Reaching a distance of about 20 yards, they paused behind a tree, hearts pounding. The hush eased slightly. They glimpsed the ghost reptile retracting from the fence, drifting back into the pond. Another swirl indicated it might have retreated into deeper water. The caretaker had made its presence known but didn't chase them further from the bank. Possibly it was tied to that watery zone, reliant on illusions to strike. Mark and Charlotte hurriedly reviewed the camera feed. The image was shaky but distinct enough to show a partial translucent reptile head. She felt both elation and stark terror. Elation, because her story was real. Terror, because the caretaker presumably thirsted for more flesh. If they lingered or a new bystander approached the fence, the hush might lure them. They decided to retreat from the area entirely, lest the caretaker or ghost alligators mount a second assault. Enough proof for one night. The next day, Charlotte compiled her footage into a short video. She approached local news channels. Some found it intriguing but concluded it was clever editing. The city responded with a standard statement: no living alligators inhabit Parksway Lake. The drowning incidents remain under investigation. Charlotte recognized the caretaker's hush extended beyond the pond. Effectively, the city's official line overshadowed her claims. She posted the raw clips on her personal blog, where it sparked a mix of awe and skepticism. While some believed, others claimed it was a special effects hoax. The caretaker presence or demon behind the alligators gained a small online following. Adventurers proposed going to the pond en masse to see the illusions. Charlotte worried about triggering a wave of reckless visitors. Meanwhile, rumors soared that the caretaker's illusions had grown bolder each night, implying the ghost reptiles might soon breach the fence entirely. Some local dog owners who walked near the pond at dusk reported hearing unearthly hisses. Park staff erected new metal signs reading "Restricted Area, Danger." That still didn't guarantee safety. Charlotte felt a moral duty to push for a solution, but no official body responded to ghost exorcisms. She recalled the caretaker's hush overshadowing logic. Eventually, an older spiritual advisor, Rowan, reached out. offering insight on a watery cleansing ritual. The caretaker demon's link might be severed if they placed protective wards or performed an exorcism in the pond's center, releasing the undead reptile spirits. Rowan admitted no prior case of reptilian hauntings, but insisted malevolent forces could wear any shape. Charlotte, recalling the battered fence, found the idea plausible. She decided, with Mark's help, to attempt a midnight boat approach, dropping an anchor with blessed items. In truth, the concept terrified her. If illusions overcame them in the boat, they might vanish under the hush, but inaction guaranteed more vanishings. Armed with Rowan's instructions, Charlotte and Mark quietly borrowed a small inflatable boat. On a drizzly night, perfect for illusions to intensify, they snuck into the park. The hush weighed on them from the moment they neared the pond. The battered fence remained. They found a gap, hauled the boat to the bank. Rowan accompanied them, carrying a lantern, a bag of salt, some herbs, and an anchor rope to drop at the pond's center. The plan: recite a banishing incantation to free the caretaker's reptile illusions and break the hush's hold. If possible, they'd also set a small symbolic item, a token representing the lost reptiles, hoping it'd lay their spirits to rest. Launching the boat onto the dark water, they felt the hush intensify with each paddle stroke. Mark aimed a powerful flashlight at the surface, revealing swirling algae and suspicious shapes. Rowan began a chant, softly beckoning the caretaker to appear, clarifying they came to break the curse. Charlotte could hardly breathe for fear. She recalled the ghost reptile's lunge that nearly tore the fence. If it attacked the boat, could intangible jaws capsize them? Halfway across, ripples emerged around them, the hush surging. Rowan scattered salt onto the surface, an archaic technique for cleansing. A faint luminescent shape glided in the deep, tail swishing. Charlotte realized multiple illusions might soon converge. She gripped the anchor Rowan carried, which was coated in chalk runes. They planned to drop it at the center. The hush soared, overhead clouds shifting. A swirl formed near the boat's bow. Mark gulped, filming the water. Then a hiss erupted, the caretaker or the biggest ghost reptile, rising with malevolent grace. Its translucent jaws parted, revealing a black emptiness. The hush overshadowed everything else, as if the moor had left normal reality behind. Rowan recited the heart of the incantation: "We release these restless souls. We break the bond binding them to these waters." The hush roiled. A second reptile form emerged to starboard. Charlotte recognized the swirl that hammered their fence nights before. Another hiss vibrated the boat's hull. She fought panic, hearing illusions of snapping jaws behind her. The caretaker demon might be controlling these reptile illusions. She poured extra salt near the bow, as Rowan instructed. Mark flailed the flashlight, uncertain. The hush pounded, threatening to knock them all into the water. Finally, Rowan signaled Charlotte to drop the anchor. She plunged it into the pond, rope in hand. As it sank, Rowan raised a small carved token representing the original living alligators. "We free you from this domain, from the caretaker's illusions," he chanted. The hush roared. A monstrous reptile lunged from the side, jaws clipping the boat's edge. The intangible slash sent icy cold through Charlotte's arm, half numbing her. She reeled, but the boat remained afloat. Rowan pressed on, chanting louder. Another reptile hammered the stern. Mark nearly toppled out. They realized the caretaker might drown them unless the ritual concluded swiftly. Rowan unleashed a final phrase, part Latin, part blessing: "Return to rightful rest. Let living waters remain pure. Hush no more. Caretaker, depart." The hush shrieked. Like a silent thunderclap. The illusions swirling around them convulsed. Forms flickering. The largest reptile reared up. Jaws open. As though preparing a final lethal strike. Rowan scattered the last handful of salt. The hush splitting into vibrations. The caretaker's illusions froze in place. Then, with a thunderous unseen force, they dissolved. Each reptile turning into watery light that sank into the darkness. The hush snapped, replaced by normal night air. The boat rocked gently. The caretaker demon or illusions had retreated. A stunned silence enveloped them. Charlotte realized she was shaking all over, still feeling the icy numbness on her arm. Mark exhaled in ragged relief. Adrenaline coursing. Rowan, pale with exertion, murmured that the caretaker presence felt gone or drastically weakened. They wasted no time paddling back. The water no longer swirled with ominous shapes, nor did the hush weigh on them. At the bank, they hauled the boat ashore, half expecting one last assault. But none came. The battered fence stood, starlight glinting on its metal links. The entire area felt lighter, as though a dark veil had lifted. Charlotte and Mark parted ways with Rowan, each drained. She concluded that their watery exorcism had severed the caretaker's link to the pond, freeing or dispersing the ghost reptile illusions. For once, she breathed easy. Later that night, no nightmares overcame her. She realized she might have witnessed the quiet end of a decades-long haunting. Over the ensuing days, locals noted the pond felt less foreboding. The hush absent. No new vanishings were reported. Park staff quietly removed old no trespassing signs, replacing them with simpler caution, unstable ground. A few dog walkers ventured near the pond without incident. Some insisted they saw the water's color lighten. Charlotte wrote a final piece describing the shift at Parksway Lake, though she kept the exorcism details minimal, referencing only the caretaker demon in broad terms. For once, city officials let it lie. The rumor of ghost alligators receded from the public mind. Months rolled by, and the haunting of Parksway Lake sank into near-forgotten lore. People resumed casual strolls by the water. The caretaker demon or ghost reptile illusions, seemingly banished, never reappeared. Charlotte left the city for a major job opportunity. Her blog references about the pond's horrors left unupdated. The older generation relaxed, grateful that no more drownings marred the pond's reputation. All seemed well. Yet a subtle epilogue emerged one stormy night. A pair of night fishermen, ignorant of the old legend, posted on social media about hooking something huge and impossible in Parksway Lake, describing an intense pull that nearly capsized their small rowboat. Their line snapped, and they glimpsed a fleeting shape in the lightning's glare, a large reptilian silhouette sinking. In the hush that followed, they claimed to hear a faint hiss. They left in a panic, vowing never to return. This story never made mainstream news, overshadowed by bigger city events. But for those who remembered the caretaker demon, it suggested the pond's occupant might not be wholly gone, perhaps lingering in some dormant form. From Charlotte's perspective, the caretaker demon had lost most of its power, but ancient forces seldom vanish entirely. If future storms or ill-advised midnight dares reawaken it, the hush may yet creep over the water again, pulling passers-by under the black surface. After all, the city's foundations are riddled with partial truths and half-lies. The caretaker demon might lie in wait for that one moment of vulnerability, a single tear in the protective wards, or a novice ghost hunter stumbling onto the watery domain. Then those swirling illusions could reform. Ephemeral jaws parted wide. For now, however, Parksway Lake rests in uneasy calm. No swirl of illusions at night. The caretaker's hush is silent. Visitors might find only a stale breeze, the faint scent of algae, and the rusted fence. But if they pause too long, near midnight, they might catch a glimpse of ripples in the moonlit water, possibly a turtle, or an average fish, or maybe the ephemeral outline of a massive reptile, half lost in reflection, staring with pale eyes, waiting for the hush to fall so it can strike again. In the end, the caretaker demon remains an echo in the city's hidden corners, a reminder that sometimes what lies beneath the surface is far from gone, merely dormant, anticipating the next curious soul who dares to peer into the murky gloom.